So, friends, I welcome you to the very important topic called when to use story points and when to use hours in estimating our payload. Okay. The reason why we have taken this topic is on the ground, 90% of the projects we see people are equating story points to hours and then deriving story points. See, friends, usually the story point estimation we do during product backlog grooming session. The product backlog grooming session happens well before the sprint planning event. In mature teams, people may estimate the stories which they may take 3 sprints or 4 sprints after during product backlog grooming session. So when you estimate the hours in product backlog grooming session, and then equate it to story points, then those are whose hours? Do you know who is going to work on it? So when you derive hours during product backlog grooming session, and when you equate it to a story points using a formula, that means X story point equal to Y hours, then what are we doing? For whose sake we are doing estimation? If ours is what we retrofit into story points, then why we require story points? Is it to satisfy somebody? Is it to claim that we are using agile terminology? Then why like that? We can as well estimate in hours and convert into days, and then we can provide, right? This is how it used to happen in the past. Now, why we do a retrofitting? So it is incorrect that we estimate in hours and then put an equation to derive story points and then say these many story points. In this session, we will clearly understand when to estimate in story points alone, not in hours. Similarly, we also delve into the topic called when to estimate in hours, not in story points. That means we are going to discover the both aspects. This is why this session is going to be very interesting, and I request you to go through it thoroughly. Okay, so let's get into the session with this note. Yeah, so friends, it is incorrect to equate story points with hours when providing estimates in story points. Once you understand the comprehensive picture that story point captures, you don't lose the habit of estimating in story points. Let us get into details now. The first aspect that we are going to discuss is when to estimate in story points, not in hours. Let us understand 3 different contexts. Okay, there is a bicycle mechanic, there is a neurology doctor, and there is a soldier. Let us suppose they work for 1 hour. That means the mechanic repairs a cycle for 1 hour, the doctor performs the surgery for 1 hour, and the soldier operates his gun for 1 hour. Do you think the outcomes are same? Do you think their salaries are same? No. For example, if you take the case of mechanic, it is very usual things he will be doing. Most of the things that he does is repetitive. Even if some part he is unable to repair, he can as well purchase that part at very low cost and get it replaced. So his salary or the money we pay for that 1 hour is very low. Why? Because most of the tasks that he does is repetitive. Second, even if he is not able to fix something, he can purchase it at very low cost. So there are 3 aspects involved. One, effort is 1 hour. Complexity, not much complexity. There is a complexity, but that is he's used to it. It's a normal complexity. Third, risk is less. Why? Because if he's unable to repair it, he can purchase that part very easily at low cost, and the customer can afford it. Coming back to the doctor, if a doctor performs a surgery, especially neurosurgeon, for 1 hour, it is going to be a very big operation. Okay. Now, complexity is more. Okay. Its complexity is more because even though he has dealt such operations in the past, every human problem is unique. So he has to do the things knowing what are the different nodes available in front of him, what are the nerves he's touching, is he taking the right instrument to touch those things, is he fixing it properly or not. That is complexity. He has to make a different choices at that particular hour. It is risky. Why? Because a doctor may perform multiple operations, but for that human being, there is the only body he is gifted with. That is why it is risky if he doesn't perform well. So when you take a bicycle mechanic case with a neurosurgeon case, the complexity is increasing because the number of parameters that the doctor has to deal is increasing. The risk that he carries is increasing. Effort is same, let's say 1 hour. That is why his job is more critical. His job is more paid, well paid. Come back to the soldier. If the soldier does his gun operated for 1 hour, I don't know what kind of outcome it will happen. In that process, he takes extreme risk, and also he ensures that he has to take care of ad hoc, unforeseen, anything, not predictable things can happen. If you see these three contexts, even though effort is same, is effort is able to capture the outcome they produce? No. In all the three cases, effort, complexity, and risk are varying. If it is a repetitive task and no risk, then that's a case of a mechanic. Now the risk is increasing from mechanic to doctor, doctor to soldier. Complexity is increasing from mechanic to doctor and doctor to soldier. Is effort alone is able to capture all the three people's effort? No. Let us think about the second scenario. Let us say there are three drivers: bus driver, the train driver, and the aeroplane pilot. Okay, nowadays the train driver is also called train pilot. Okay, now you think about the complexity they handle. Okay, now some bus driver is basically, he usually goes on the same route, so he knows what kind of road, when the road is not good, when there is a toll, when to stop, when there is accident prone zone. He repeats it, so he knows it, so it's safe to go like this. But is it not complex? It is complex, but he's used to it. He can automatically, he drives it. Similarly, if you come to the train driver, complexity may be less because there is no traffic in between, but risk is more. Because it is not just the train pilot does a mistake. If there's a mistake in that railway track, if there's a mistake in the signaling system, then not just his life, the whole train passengers, their life is at risk. Whole train passengers, they trust this driver for that night or for that journey, and they sleep comfortably. And he has to perform his task well. So risk is extremely high in case of a train pilot, in case of a bus driver. Now let's come to the aeroplane. Now, aeroplane, if you see, once the aeroplane take off and landing is more difficult. Let me tell you, whole journey of aeroplane is around 60%. The landing is 40% or 50%. So we have to land very, very carefully. Now, you may ask, once the aeroplane takes off and it is in the air, now he is not doing anything, probably taking care of the autopilot suggestions or the mechanical devices suggestions. He will be driving. So what's the big risk he's taking, you may ask? But the point is, friends, he's driving in a sky where he doesn't see anything. Only by use of magnets he will do. And if there is a turbulence in the air, he has to make the height alterations to come across it. So also the risk that he carries is extremely high, extremely high. A train driver can stop an accident, but whereas the aeroplane driver, he may not contained an accident. He's in a way dependent on the magnets and also the commentary that he receives from the grounds. So in both cases, it's just not the effort. It is the risk they carry, the complexity they carry matters. So in this scenario also, effort alone is not able to capture the whole outcome that they're able to produce. Now, let us go to the third one, right? That is third case. Yeah. Now, there is a street play where two cricket teams are playing and there's an international cricket match. Now, a batsman who plays, let's say, for about an hour, he makes around 60 runs in a street cricket game. Whereas the same batsman, he plays an international match and for a 1 hour, he scores around 30 runs. Do you think that street player is more good? No. Similarly, within an international match also, it also depends upon the opponents with whom you play. If you come across strong teams, then the bowlers will be more, more mature, and they pace the balls in such a way that making runs at their balls is very difficult. Okay, they pace the ball in such a way, they spin the ball, the speed will be more, and in that glance of the moment, they're all skilled people, and to make runs there, you require higher skill. So even though the outcome, the runs are there, you can't just say both games or both outcomes are same, right? So what I'm saying is, when effort is not able to capture the outcomes that we have discussed, okay, then why are we equating hours with story points? Why are we reverse fitting these hours with story points? And then we are telling that this is this many story points worth of effort. So there's a bigger context. The bigger context is story point captures effort, complexity, and risk. Effort is the number of hours or days you invest to complete the task or to complete that particular thing. Now, what story point captures? Story point captures whatever it takes to meet the definition of done. What is definition of done? The definition of done is a sample can be development is completed as per the set standards. Code checked into the repository. Unit tests are written and passed. Peer review was conducted, comments incorporated and passed. Functional tests written by QA are passed, and there is a traceability of functional tests with the acceptance criteria. Okay, and there is integration test was conducted and integration test sign-off is available. Regression test sign-off is available. It is deployed to staging for the product to perform UAT. The product has performed UAT and UAT has passed, and there is a sign-off available. And then it is deployed to production, and then there is a sanity testing done, and everything is working properly. This is a sample definition of done. You can actually, every team, depending upon their context, they will set their definition of done. Story point is all about whatever it takes for the development team to meet the definition of done. In the process, there is an effort, there is a complexity, there is a risk. So all the three together will capture the temperature, the mood, and the whole outcome of the particular effort. So story points capture effort, complexity, and risk. Now, if you equate story point only with effort, this means you are doing injustice, my friends. Especially, we estimate stories in story points in product backlog grooming sessions. During product backlog grooming sessions, there will be more unknowns. That is why we prefer to relative size of estimation, right? Compared to these base stories, what is the story points of my story with respect to effort, complexity, and risk? So that is why we need to extend our mindset to effort, complexity, and risk to decide the story points. Now, let us first discuss about what is complexity. As you all are educated, most of you may be coming from mathematics background. I just want to say that, application of the algebraic equations, for example, a plus b whole square is equal to a square plus 2ab plus b square. A minus b whole square is equal to a square minus 2ab plus b square. A square minus b square is equal to a plus b into a minus b. A plus b whole square minus of a minus b whole square is 4ab. That means you are dealing with two variables and it is a 2-degree quadratic equation. Is it not complex? Yes, it is complex, but it is normal. For example, if you are studying 11th class or 12th class, then these equations should be normal for you because you were well educated during 9th and 10th classes, right? But it is normal complexity, right? First, whenever you are asked to solve equation under 2-degree, then first you need to know, okay, there are two variables, and then which formula I need to apply, and then how I have to apply. You have to apply some carefulness in terms of applying plus, minus, because if you don't apply the plus and minus, the whole outcome will go for a different task, and you won't get answers, and you won't get marks, right? So that is a 2-degree. Now, when you come the 2-degree from 2 variables to 3 variables, that means a plus b plus c whole square is equal to a square plus b square plus c square plus 2ab plus 2ba plus 2ca. Now, see the beauty here. A plus b minus c whole square is equal to a square plus b square plus c square plus 2ab minus 2ac minus 2bc. Now, you need to be very careful in terms of applying where to apply the minus sign. Similarly, a minus b minus c whole square is equal to a square plus b square plus c square minus 2ab plus 2bc minus 2ac. So you will ask, which session I came from? Is it a mathematics session or is it an agile story point session? I want to let you know, my friends, what is complexity. If you go and ask anybody on the ground, story point captures complexity, effort, and risk. But what is complexity? Ask. How many people will respond? You yourself can know. That is why I wanted to build a ground-up scenario. What is complexity? Complexity involves when more variables are there, more complex, right? And also the degree of complexity here in terms of first example is 2 variables 2-degree. Second example is 3 variables 2-degree. Third example is 2 variables 3-degree. As the degree increases, as the variable increases, the complexity increases. The complexity of making sure that you apply those formula properly, you develop that particular formula properly, you apply plus and minus properly, and right time, right formula you use. This is what is complexity. So in our software context, what is happening is there will be different nodes. You have to go from beginning to end. Which route I have to use? More number of nodes in between, more complexities, right? So when it comes to our software context, what are we doing? Essentially, you will be modifying a function here. That is a function that is in the between, right, in the middle, and this function interacts with multiple functions in the ecosystem. So I'm coming to the same point. I'm not trying to tell the mathematical formula. I'm actually applying it to software context. In software context, what is complexity? In software context, what is risk? So essentially, let us suppose we are trying to modify or create a new function that exists or that is going to exist in ecosystem with other already established functions. Now, what is complexity? Okay. Now, complexity is the difficult level, mostly with dealing with number of units to be changed while achieving the desired result objectives. So it can be front-end functions, it can be back-end functions, it can be DB component, database components, it can be configurations to be changed, it can be business rules. So more number of units to be modified while achieving a user story, more complex it is. Not just that, business rules. Okay, that also will come to that later. Okay, now complexity at outset, you can think about it is about the number of variables, the degree at which you are dealing, right? More number of variables, more complex. So in our software context, right, it is how many functions you are going to deal, how many backend, how many front end, and how many database components, what are the configurations, what are the business rules, right? These the set. More number means more complex. Now, what's the risk? Risk means first time handling of a change. That means our team has never handled this thing before. It's the first time. So we may be successful, we may not be successful. So that is a risk. Second thing is, now whatever changes that you are doing here, right, it will impact to a high scale other functions. You may be doing a simple thing, but the dependent functions are impacted. So that is where the high risk is there. Business rules that you're modifying, it might impact the overall impact of the system. Okay. And there's a uniqueness. That means the technology may be unique. So you may be doing it for the first time. Similarly, the outcome of it is very important. Users like CXOs, CEOs, those people are actually going to use this user story. So you have to really test it well, right? And there's an uncertainty factor. There's a lot of dependencies. You have to discuss with multiple people. Today, the design is like this. Tomorrow, it might change. So these are the risk factors. See, friends, I'm trying to detail complexity and risk in detail because even after 10 years of implementation, Agile implementation, people are not clear about what is complexity, what is risk. People may tell story point may have effort, complexity, and risk. But what is complexity? What is risk? When do we claim more number of story points under the head of complexity? People are not able to tell. This is where I'm trying to bring the ground up here so that you understand it. Okay. Now, complexity in more detail. For example, if you are changing a function, now what kind of business rules you're changing? Are you converting the input parameters to derived parameters? Are you changing the global variables? Are you changing the application variables? Are you changing the local variables? And is there redundancy? Shall we have to do optimization? Is there a technical depth involved? Okay, so these are the things that it comes when you that qualifies for complexity. Similarly, certain times complexity in analyzing the requirements. Certain times the customer may give the requirements at very high level. I've seen customers saying they write a user story and they give more or less okay kind of types of acceptance criteria, and they start expecting everything at the end of the sprint. It is just that you need to do more analysis. I've seen the product owner gives user story at 30% detail, just 70% the team themselves do the analysis. If we don't do that, then we can't meet the outcome. So because of the poor contribution from the product owner, then there is a burden on technical team in analyzing. So people say, why have you taken these many hours or story points for this? Then you have to say, the requirements that are provided to us is at 30% detail. To make it known to the technical team, we require certain effort in terms of understanding those things. That's why we are claiming certain story points for complexity. Okay, if you don't want us to claim story points under the head of complexity in this scenario, then better give us definition of ready, very detailed user stories. Similarly, there will be certain scenarios wherein finalizing a design, okay, it may so happen on the ground that you may be assuming something and you'll be proceeding, but there is a possibility of a design change can be there. And a group of architects together, they need to formulate the design. So in that process, there's a complexity involved. If at all they change something, then there'll be more impact here. Similarly, while designing mobile applications, right, the UX designer, he has to come well at the beginning of the project, but in some projects he will come towards the last or towards the middle. Now once you develop the application, now what happens is if the UX designer joins late and he starts giving the UX designs, then you may have to reorient your front end screens towards that particular UX design. So there will be a rework will be there. So similarly, complexity in deployment. Okay, there are certain organizations, they're not very mature in terms of achieving the CI/CD and the deployment process. So you may require a DevOps guy, a developer who has developed it together to be there while deploying it, so that end users may not get impacted. Anything wrong happens, you can quickly revert back. So such kind of thing, right, are qualifying for complexity. Similarly, there are certain users where they are very tough. Okay, they won't give acceptance very easily. So they will ask more details from you in terms of accepting it. There are certain product owners who may not come for product sprint review sessions. Okay, and they still claim saying that these stories are okay, not okay, and then after 2 months or 3 months they bring a escalation. So getting an acceptance from them may be difficult. So there are many things are there. This is what is complexity. What is complexity is this kind of a thing. So head one is whatever I discussed here. Head two is this. So this is the complexity. Similarly, when it comes to risk, right, while modifying this particular function, there are unknowns, uniqueness, first time handling. Okay, the VIP users are there, or maybe you have to do more testing, like language testing is required, more integration testing is required, more regression testing is required. Maybe development may be simple, but testing is more, because it is a very important piece, critical piece. And if you don't test it properly, then the users may get impacted. So friends, I'm just trying to tell, when providing story point estimation, people usually give more space for development and less space for testing. No, it's not like that. What I'm conveying here is, as I suggested here, story point captures the whole mood of the context to meet definition of done. Okay, most of the teams on the ground nowadays, they don't know what is definition of done. Okay, only one or two people or three people, they may be knowing what is definition of done, right? It is not like fair. Okay, we need to know what is definition of done, and every person should know definition of done. And somebody says some user story is done, that means you should comply to definition of done. And now whatever effort, whatever complexity, whatever risk that is required to meet the definition of done, that is what is qualifies for story point estimation. And in the process, your complexity, your risk, and your effort need to be taken care. Some sample thing, it's not a standard, but just I want to give a thought process for you. Okay, when it comes to dealing with complexity, when you want to claim certain story points for complexity, you can put a X and Y axis here. That means number of units, more, that means number of functions, APIs you're dealing, business rules or configurations, the database components. So there's a number of units here, and difficulty level. Okay, low, medium, high, and very high. Now what happens is, the score, like whatever is there here in this particular quadrant here, it is the multiplication of number of units multiplied by number of the difficulty level. So it is low, 1 multiplied by 1 is 1, 1 multiplied by 2 is 2, 1 multiplied by 3 is 3, 1 multiplied by 4 is 4. Okay, similarly, medium is 2, and here is 1. So 2 multiplied by 1 is 2, 2 multiplied by 2 is 4. Likewise, so it's a product of number of units with the difficulty level. Okay, and if the score is less than 3 story points, you don't claim for complexity. If the score, the product that you see here in this particular quadrant is equal to 3 story points, you may claim 1 story point. If it is 4 to 6, the product comes 4 to 6, then you can say 2 story points. If it is more than 7 or 7 to 9, 3 story points. If it's greater than 10, then this is the red zone. Then you might want to take a spike to really know the difficulty level. You may want to see whether you can split the story point, the user story, and then you wanted to take a spike and you wanted to analyze it properly, and you may want to come back. So it's just a thought process structure. I'm not saying you can take this as a reference. No. See, tomorrow, if you claim certain story points for complexity, you should be in a position to answer why you are claiming more story points for complexity. So is for risk. For example, risk has two contexts. On x-axis, number of units impacted. On the y-axis, the probability or likelihood. So here also you can come up with same paradigm where low, medium, high, and very high are given 1, 2, 3, 4 ratings. Similarly, the probability is given low as 1, medium as 2, high as 3, very high as 4. And the product is here. Similarly, based on the risk score, you can come back saying that given the past, probably this may work. Likewise, see, I'm not saying you can take this standard and implement in your field. No, I'm not telling. It is context specific. But I want to give a thought process to you that when it comes to complexity, how many number of units you are changing and what is the difficulty level. This is how you have to think about it. And there needs to be a genuine reason in terms of claiming certain story point for complexity. And there is a, similarly for risk, number of units you are impacting and probability that you are going to impact. So the probability may be high, medium, and low kind of a thing. So this is how you have to think about it. And now it comes to story point estimation. See, friends, in this session, I'm not going to discuss about how to estimate in story points. As part of my email, I have already sent you the link of how to estimate in story points, where I have explained in that video very clearly. Okay, so you can as well see my video where you can identify how to estimate using story points. Here, I'm going to talk about when to use story points and when to use hours. Okay, so when it comes to here, now let's say there are 3 base stories, 2 story point, 5 story point, and 8 story points. They're all already estimated by the team. And now there's a big rock here. It's a user story where team is asked to estimate story points. Now they need to think about effort, complexity, and risk. That is uncertainty. So what they need to think about is they basically think about it. Okay, is it the story effort wise more weighted than these 2 story points? Similarly, is it fitting between 5 and 8? So they need to think about 3 parameters. Effort may be same, but here the complexity is more. And because of this reason, here I'm going to change more number of units here. I'm going to change the business rules here. They're going to be critical. Maybe this story is complexity-wise equating with 5, but it has more risk because it's the first time we are handling this. This kind of technology, we have never used it. This is how we have to use it. In relative size estimation, when you do a triangulation where you try to put this user story between different denomination user stories that were already estimated, you have to think about effort, complexity, and risk factors while doing relative size estimation. Okay, so this is why I'm telling you relative size estimation you do because you estimate these stories during product backlog grooming session, which happens well before than sprint planning session. So that's why the unknowns will be more. So that's why instead of coming up with absolute estimation where we require more number of parameters to be clear, which is not possible, Agile says, okay, it is okay if you come up with rough estimation. If you're okay, 85% of estimate, if you are able to give accurately, that is fine. This is where story point estimation is coming to picture, which is relative and also quick. Okay, now let me make a point here, my friends. If you ask people how the story point estimation is done, while people showing the planning poker, okay, here is where planning poker, okay, they show the cards, okay, 0, half, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. Okay. And what parameters they keep in their mind? If you ask, very less number of people can give you a proper answer. They have to think about effort, complexity, and risk in relatively to already estimated user stories, right? So this is how they have to think. And now you can ask, why are we using Fibonacci series? Okay, mathematically, it is proven that, whether it is a virus, whether it is a number of plants, any parameter, any complexity, any risk, mathematically it is proven that the growth will be aligning to Fibonacci series. So here, our estimation, which is going to be the fundamental parameters of making it successful. Because see, friends, today, it is the estimation. Everything boils down to estimation. Okay. And the trust between customer and the provider, the trust between the product owner and the development team, all those things are coming down to estimation. Are we estimating it right? So because it's a fundamental, it is very important parameter, we assume the size increases as per the Fibonacci series, because mathematically they've studied many parameters like virus, or any positive thing or any negative thing. The way it is populating, increasing, is aligning with Fibonacci series. So we also will say that, the size is increasing. And on top of that, the story point estimation is a relative size estimation. So we're not 100% accurate. We are approximately 85% accurate. So for example, if you estimate, it has to align with this. For example, you think that certain story is more than 3, then there is no 4. You have to go for the next level, that is 5. So this is what we have to follow. Okay. So friends, what we have discussed here, we discussed that while capturing the outcome, a user story has to meet the definition of done. Who decides the definition of done? The team, basis on their context. To meet the definition of done, okay, whatever effort is required, whatever complexity is required, whatever risk is required, the three together captures the whole mood of estimation. So that's why we have to use story points here. We should not use ours. If you use ours, okay, this is whose ours? The story point estimation will be done well before the sprint planning session. Okay, in mature teams, it may happen 3-4 sprints before. That means 3-4 sprints before. Do you know who is going to pick up this user story? No, that particular person may be on leave. We don't know. So reverse fitting ours into story points is not correct. We have to consider effort, complexity, and risk. Okay. Now, if the estimation, how it happens is, okay, now I'm planning to estimate user story 1. Effort wise, given my relative user story, it is equal to that 1 story point worth of story. I have estimated, I means the team has estimated as 1 story in the past. It is equating the same thing. And there is normal complexity. It's very straightforward. Risk is also not there. So it's 1 story point. So I'm not claiming anything for complexity and risk. Okay. Similarly, when it comes to user story 2, you will say effort wise, it is equating with the same user story. But however, it's complex because I'm changing the business rules. So I'm claiming 1 story point and document that reason for that. Similarly, third user story, effort is same, but there is a complexity. And I am trying to address a very important user requirement here. So I'm claiming 1 story point. Document the reason here. So in this case, the mental model, while we are doing the relative size estimation, like for example, here, the users or team members are estimating their user story, they have to think about effort wise relatively where it fits. How many story point you can give. And then risk wise, do we have to claim a story point? If so, what is the reason? For example, you can as well come up with saying risk probability versus number of units impacted. It's just an indicator. Okay, you need not follow it, but I'm trying to give a mathematical model for you. Similarly, complexity wise, shall I have to claim more story points? Here also you can use here difficulty level versus number of units you are thinking about. Okay, this thought process, x-axis number of units, y-axis the difficulty level. So when you do this kind of a thing, then you will come up with, okay, using relative size estimation, effort wise, complexity wise, risk wise. See, friends, I'm telling you, on the ground, most of the team members, they are not considering complexity and risk at all. In nutshell, what is happening is they end up working more to deal with the complexity and risk, but they claim less number of story points. Even stakeholders also think, oh, these team members, no, they just produce less story points. No, they're handling high number of complexity. They're handling high risk. They're eligible to claim more story points, which we are not doing. But only thing is, wherever we are claiming story points for complexity and risk, we must document the reasons so that anybody can validate. Okay, right. So this is how it has to be. Now you understand, right, friends? We can't equate ours with story points and do relative size estimation. And we can't give story points by equating X story points equal to Y hours. That's not right. That's incorrect. Okay. Now once you consider effort, complexity, and risk, you actually capture the whole mood of the context to meet the definition of depth. So this is where the story point estimation is asking you to consider these parameters. It is just that we need to understand the whole dimension of story points and we must use it. Once you start using it, you love it. You don't want to go to hours when it comes to estimation story points for upcoming sprints. Okay. Now, the benefit of estimating a story points, the benefit of estimating user stories in story points is not this, is not alone this. Okay. The benefit is you can predict your roadmap very easily. See, friends, I'm telling you, we are working in a project. Product backlog grooming session is happening. Now we estimate story points, okay, for each user story. Now the customer asks how many sprints it takes, how much is the duration. It's very easy, okay. I have 3 teams. Let's say their velocity is 30 story points. Now I basically club it into sprints and say this team can do 30 story points worth of work here, 30 story points worth of work here, 30 story points worth of work here. Now they are loaded for next 4 sprints, and this release is a 2-month sprint where each sprint is 2 weeks. So 2 weeks multiplied by 2-week sprint multiplied by 4 is actually coming to 2 months. So the team 1 will produce 120 story points, 30 plus 30 plus 30 plus 30. Similarly, team 2 will produce 120 story points. Team 3 will produce 120 story points. Total 360 story points we can produce. Now the point is, now is product owner ready? Question. You see, when you do things properly, you can put the ball in their court. It is not the product owner who is asking. It is not the customer who is putting the technical team onto a task. You can as well do that. Okay, I have 360 story points worth of capacity with me. How much is the product backlog ready? So far, 90 story points are ready. That means around 100 or around 270 story points is not yet groomed. So how can I start the project? This is where you turn the project into a right dimension, right? Otherwise, what happens is with many assumptions, you end up taking the load and then you keep doing, and then ultimately we will be penalized. No, it has to be right person should do the right work at the right time. So basically, once you estimate in story points, you basically predict the project roadmap. Okay, you can say how many sprints it will take, how many releases it will take, and how many sprints it takes to deliver your minimum viable product. All those equations will come here. Okay, so now I want to come to the second. I'm flipping now. That's why the arrow symbol is towards left. When to estimate in hours, not in story points. So far, I've been talking. We must estimate in story points, not in hours. Now, as part of this session, I want to cover the second aspect: when to estimate only in hours, not in story points, and why. Okay. Now, within a sprint, that means on a sprint planning day, you have the velocity. For example, here you can see this team is capable of producing 30 story points given their average velocity in the last 3 or 4 sprints. Now, the product owner says, okay, I'm giving 6 stories, 7 stories to you, given your average velocity. And now, can you tell me how many stories you can take, right? Now, what we must do is user story must be divided into tasks. These tasks should relate to definition of done, because unless these set of checklists are done, you can't consider this as done. So it is better you design tasks for that, and each item in checklist may contribute for one task. So this task is assigned to some person called Ram, and he takes 6 hours. Look at the beauty, my friend. It is a 2-week sprint. You are only going to estimate for the next 2 weeks. So 95% you are clear for the next 2 weeks who is going to work, right? And so you are assigning this particular task to a person and hours. So when you do a person-based allocation on sprint planning day, that means the complexity and the risk is getting embodied into that person. For example, Ram is capable guy. He's a subject matter expert. He has handled those things. So when you are actually putting a name there, that means this complexity and risk is getting embodied there. Okay. So there is another thought process where people say, keep the average developer in mind, not a specific person. Okay, let's take average person. Now, for an average person, risk-wise, complexity-wise, effort-wise, how much hours it takes. This is for next 2 weeks. You take that particular thing. So the task user story is divided into tasks, and tasks are assigned to a specific person. In some cases, people voluntarily takes, that is cross-functional mature teams, that we deal it later. But usually on a sprint planning day, the tasks split, the user story splitting into tasks, and they being assigned to specific person and coming up with an estimate. So let us suppose, keeping an average person, average developer in mind, how many hours it will take, we can basically come back with an estimate. We can say user story may take 40 hours. User story 1 will take 40 hours. And how the tasks are decided? Basis on definition of time. Similarly, if you take likewise user story 2, it may take 60 hours. User story 3, right? It may take 80 hours. User story 5, I just say 5, it's 4 user story is 120 hours. So what I'm conveying is how these hours are decided by splitting user story into tasks, and those tasks are assigned to specific persons, and these hours are assuming an average person. So an average developer, not very beginner or not very expert, but average developer, keeping the complexity and risk, how many hours it will take. So you can estimate it, so that anybody tomorrow can take this user story. Okay. Now, so likewise, let's say whatever user stories that product owner has given to meet the definition of done, let's say 40 hours, 60 hours, 80 hours, 120 hours. If you sum it up, it is actually coming to 300 hours. Okay. This is happening on the sprint planning day. Now basically you have to now think about the capacity available. Let's say you have a 6-member team. Now, what are the available hours? How many hours we have to deduct? For example, there's a planned leaves will be there, and then some meetings will be there. So what are those actuals and effective work hours are available? From Ram is 68, from Som is 56, from Lakshman is 68. Likewise, let's say if you add all the hours, 300 hours. Now, what we must do is we must reconcile. That means whatever stories that product owner is giving, it is adding up to 300 hours, and my team capacity is 300 hours. So it is matching. So at certain times the team may have a little more capacity, 320 hours. That's okay. You may not do a proper match, but 10, 20 hours, 30 hours more is okay. Okay, that kind of thing you can take. But the reconciliation has to happen. Whatever hours are required to complete user stories, that is on the left-hand side, whatever hours are available for work from the team for this sprint, that's right-hand side, and then you reconcile. When you reconcile, the effort, complexity, and risks are embedded in the named assignment. For example, somebody says, I take this user story. So when you take it, that particular thing, that risk and effort and complexity are getting embodied. For example, let's say I want to ask a question. How much time it takes for you to drive to work? Now, you know that there will be traffic on the road. You know that, the kind of the vehicle condition you're having. You know at what time you start. Embodying all those things, you will give an answer, right? So likewise, when a named assignment will happen, or keeping the average developer in mind, now that effort and complexity are getting into that particular work assignment to a named person. So it's appropriate because now the point I'm trying to convey here is on a sprint planning day, you must decide the sprint payload for that particular sprint basis on hours. See, friends, I want to tell you, there are people who come to sprint planning and they decide the sprint payload based on story points. For example, if the team velocity is 30 story points and product owner brings user stories for 30, 6 stories, and they basically cut, okay, 30 story points worth of work I take because my capacity is 30 story points. That's wrong. Why I'm telling you? See, story point is approximate estimation. It is not 100%. It is relative estimation. Now, it may so happen that, in a user story, you might encounter more complexity, because when you divide the user story into tasks, in real time, you might unfold more number of hours required. So estimating user stories or deciding the sprint payload basis on the story points, that's wrong. And you can see whether I'm talking right or wrong. More number of teams where the sprint payload is being decided based on story points, either they are doing repeatable work with normal complexity, that's why it is working there, or more number of stories are getting spilled to multiple sprints. And this is another problem. When stories are getting spilled to multiple sprints, then business will have a problem because their predictability will be having a problem. That is why during a sprint, you must use hours to estimate. But when it comes to estimating the project duration, the upcoming sprint payload, or when the clarity is not that much, where you're using relative size estimation, you must use story points. Okay, so this is how you have to use hours here in this context. So in summary, equating story points with hours is not correct. That is wrong. Through this session, I want to sensitize teams that 90% of the teams who are estimating using hours and then doing reverse fitting with story points is wrong. Some teams will say, one day is one story point. Some teams will say 2 days is one story point. Some teams even say 3 hours is one story point. This is bad. Okay, this is a bad way of implementing the agile concepts. You can't equate story points to hours using an equation. That may work if complexity and risk are normal. That means you are doing repetitive work. But in our context, we may be dealing with unique context. So that is why we have to use story points for forward sprint planning, forward sprints. For the current sprint, you have to use hours. So I hope this analogy, this understanding is a key takeaway. It's a key takeaway for each of you. When to use story points, when to use hours. Use story points for 2 purposes. For forward planning of the sprints, and also think about it. Okay, in a specific sprint in the back, there is a dip in the velocity. Why? You are not introspecting, you're not policing, you're not policing, you're not micromanaging. You're trying to find a reason why sprint number 3 there is a dip in velocity. There you use story point. So in the current sprint, you use hours. But for the forward sprints and for the backward sprints pattern, you use story points to understand the whole context. So I feel all the software professionals must know this. All agile practitioners must know this, right? When to use story points and when to use hours. With that pain, I have taken this session saying that, guys, propagate this message. Story points are used to forecast forward sprint plannings. For the current sprint, it is hours. Okay. With this, I come to the end of the session and I'm open to take the questions. And I really thank your time on this Saturday. I hope you have taken good message out of this session, because it is one of the burning topics happening topics on the ground. I hope this message is going to be useful to you. Thank you.